we just took our quiz on direct object pronouns. Can you remind me what a direct object is in the sentence?
The thing that is who or what of the verb.
Is receiving the action, yes. Who or what is receiving the action? Today we're going to be talking about indirect object pronouns and what they are and identifying and replacing them in a sentence. So if I said, well, first of all, can you tell me, do you have any idea what an indirect object pronoun is? Let me give you a sentence. Please pass the tamales to me. Any idea what the indirect object would be? To me. So at least you can identify it. It's something, the pronoun is going to replace or accompany the indirect object noun, so the actual indirect object. But the definition is they're receiving the direct objects. Okay? I said, please pass the tamales to me. Who's receiving the tamales? Me. Okay, that's what an indirect object. They receive direct objects. And if you notice, they say they replace or accompany nouns, so the indirect object nouns. Because in proper grammar, when you write in Spanish, when you have an indirect object like please pass the tamales to me, you have to have the pronoun and the clarification to me. Or if I said please pass the tamales to Raul, you'd have to have Raul in there and the indirect object pronoun as part of proper grammar. So when we practice this, I'm actually giving you improper sentences because you really, really need the pronoun. But I'm not giving you the pronoun because I want you to come up with them on your own. Does that make sense? You just kind of bear with me here. We'll figure it out. You'll understand more what I'm talking about. Let's see here. Is it going? Okay, so let me give you another example of what we're talking about here. She bought presents for her friends. Les compró regalos a sus amigos. Let me do this. All right, if I'm looking at the English, she bought presents for her friends. What's the action? Bought. Okay. What did she buy? Presents. This is our direct object. Who did she buy them for?
Her friends.
For her friends. And that's going to be your indirect object. And if you notice, we are going to be circling the indirect objects. So, the Spanish, les compró regalos a sus amigos. The indirect object is accompanying this. For her friends, we don't have that pronoun in English. We just say for her friends. That's the indirect object. But proper Spanish grammar says, she bought is compró regalos, direct objects, a sus amigos is clarifying who the les is. We just have to have that pronoun les in there. So I'm going to show you how we did this here on the next slide. This is the proper, again, Spanish sentence. And then this one down here is the one with it replaced. We got rid of her friends. And so instead of saying she bought presents for her friends, we're saying she bought presents for them. Les compró regalos. All right. Also, just a hint, if there's an indirect object, there's probably a direct object too. All right. Let's break it down and go, and I'll show you the steps of doing this. All right. The first step you need to do is identify the direct object. How do we identify the direct object? We have to reflect back to what we were just practicing. Find the verb, ask who or what is receiving the action, and that's your direct object. So you got to do all those first steps before you do this. Then after finding the direct object, you're asking who is receiving that direct object, and I want you to circle it. So underline the verb once, double underline the direct object. We're still doing that. And then you're going to circle the indirect object, or who's receiving their direct object. Okay? You're going to replace it with an indirect object pronoun, which I'm going to show you here in just a second. Okay? And then that pronoun is going to go in front of the conjugated verb, just like we do with direct objects. Okay? So whatever we underline, you just stick it in front of that. And here are your pronouns. It's me, te, lay, nos, and les. And yes, those first person and second person, the me, te, and nos, those are just like the direct objects, I know. Maybe just so you don't get confused, they're the same. But the lay and the lace, it doesn't matter on gender. Like we had lo and la for direct objects, it's just lay for him or her, or it. Or them is lace. It doesn't matter who's them, it's just always lace. Okay. Find the direct object. Find out who's receiving that direct object and circle it. Put it in front of the conjugated verb after you replace it with may, te, lay, nos, or lace. Very good? Oh, I'll give you a second. Okay. All right, so here's some examples. Let me get my pen out here. All right, el mesero dio la cuenta a Laura. The waiter gave Laura the bill. So what's my action? Gave. Okay? So it's the verb dio. Okay, what did he give? He gave the bill. Okay, so that's your direct object. Double underline, that's your direct object. And who's receiving this bill? Laura. So that is our indirect object, and we're going to circle it. Indirect object. All right, the next step is to do what after I've circled it? We're going to change it to what? To lay. Good. And then what do I do with it? Put it in front of the conjugated verb dio. So I get rid of that. And click. El mesero le dio la cuenta. Okay, so like I was saying before, this sentence that we practice with is really a wrong sentence in Spanish. It's supposed to be el mesero le dio la cuenta a Laura. This is just here to clarify who that lay is referring to. So whenever you are in your job, working in a hospital, translating for somebody, or translating papers, or just speaking to somebody in general in Spanish, you should have that indirect object in there. And the a Laura part just clarifies. Does that make better sense now? So you shouldn't have a sentence when it has an indirect object without a pronoun in there to accompany it.
So can people say el mesero le dio la cuenta a Laura?
That's how it's supposed to be. This is really a wrong, this first one, el mesero dio la cuenta a Laura, that's a wrong sentence because it's missing its pronoun. It needs the pronoun in there. This is what you don't need, is the a Laura. You don't need the a Laura because it's just clarifying who the lay is referring to.
So on the second one, you wouldn't put a Laura?
Right, because we're just saying, notice the translation differences. The waiter gave the bill to Laura, or I'm sorry, gave Laura the bill. And here it's the waiter gave the bill to her. So that's what dropping off Laura does. It makes it her. By adding her name, it's clarifying who that lay is referring to. But for sake of our practices, I'm going to give you wrong sentences because I want you guys to be able to know your pronouns. I don't want you to say, well, I'll just drop off Laura and call it good. Okay, I want you to be able to do this. All right, here's another sentence. Tú das un regalo a nosotros. All right, what's my verb? Yep. Das, what did you give? Un regalo to who? Nosotros, replace it with nos, and it goes in front of das. All right, so we're left with tú nos das un regalo. So this, you can just say nos das un regalo and be good to go. Or if you wrote it a nosotros, because this could be a mamá y yo, a nosotros part, and clarify it. But you give us, a gift to us is the same translation on both. Alright, the a nosotros is clarifying or emphasizing who that nos is. Alright, I need to stop my video real quick.